They call me the spreadsheet ghost. I know they do. I've seen the Slack messages pop up on the screens they forget to lock when they run out for 3 martini lunches. They think I'm invisible because I don't wear colors that scream for attention, and I don't speak unless I have something to say that will actually make us money. In a firm like Ascend Capital, silence is mistaken for stupidity. But silence is where the leverage lives. I'm Emily. I'm 42. I'm a senior investment strategist, and I'm the reason half the people in this glass-walled aquarium can afford their leases on leased BMWs. The day everything started to shift, the day the tectonic plates of my loyalty finally cracked, started like any other Tuesday. The air conditioning in the building was set to meet locker, a temperature specifically designed to keep men in wool suits comfortable while the women froze. I was sitting in my corner office. Well, calling it a corner office is generous. It was in the corner, yes, but it was behind the server room. The hum of the cooling fans was my constant companion, a white noise drone that drowned out the sales floor's testosterone-fueled shouting. I was looking at the Q3 projections for our tech holdings. The numbers were screaming at me, red flags, the kind of subtle, systemic weakness in the supply chain data that precedes a 20% correction. I walked into the morning briefing with my tablet and a clear conscience. The conference room was all chrome and ego. At the head of the table sat Marcus, our CEO. Marcus was a man who looked like he was assembled in a factory that built generic Fortune 500 executives. Silver hair, perfectly capped teeth, and a tan that defied the NY winter. Next to him was Braden. Braden. God, just saying his name makes my molars grind. Braden was 29, had an MBA from a school his father donated a library to, and wore loafers with no socks. He was loud, he was wrong about everything, and Marcus looked at him like he was the second coming of Warren Buffett. Emily, Marcus said, not looking up from his phone, we're wrapping up. Braden has a killer idea for the crypto allocation. The tech sector is overleveraged, I said, my voice flat. I didn't yell, I never yell. If we don't rotate into industrials by Friday, we're going to take a $12 million hit when the Asian markets open on Monday. Braden laughed. It was a wet, dismissive sound. Always the doom and gloom, Em. We're riding the wave. Don't be a dinosaur, I repeated. Market sentiment is bullish, Braden said, tapping the table with a gold pen he didn't know how to use. You're looking at lag indicators. I'm looking at the vibe. The vibe. It was risking 8 figures of client capital on a vibe. Okay, listen, I said, leaning forward. Before I continue, I just want to say if you guys enjoy stories about corporate idiots getting absolutely destroyed by the people they underestimate, do me a favor and hit subscribe or drop a like. It actually helps get this story out there. Anyway, back to the vibe. Marcus waved a hand, dismissing me. We're going with Braden's play. Also, Emily, while you're standing, we've made a decision on the VP of strategy role. The room went quiet. This was the promotion I had been working toward for 5 years. I had built the algorithmic models. I had saved the firm during the 2020 crash. It was mine. It had to be. We feel we need fresh energy, Marcus said, finally looking me in the eye. His eyes were empty. Someone who embodies the future of Ascend. We're promoting Braden. I didn't blink. I didn't cry. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach. It wasn't sadness. It was the feeling of a bridge burning. Congratulations, Braden, I said. My voice sounded mechanical. Thanks, M, Braden smirked. I'll need you to forward me your login credentials for the master strategy deck. I want to tweak the fonts. I walked out of that room, and for the first time in 10 years, I didn't go back to my desk to work. I went to the break room to get a coffee I didn't want. That's when I heard her voice. Vanessa, the CEO's wife. She didn't work here, obviously. She was a brand ambassador, which meant she came in twice a week to terrorize the assistants and drink the expensive sparkling water stocked for clients. She was standing by the reception desk, wearing a white fur coat that cost more than my car. She was talking to Marcus, who had followed her out. So, is it done? She asked, her voice carrying through the open door. Yeah, Braden's in, Marcus said, laughing. Good, Vanessa sneered. I was so tired of seeing that mouse in the meetings. Emily, is that her name? She dresses like a librarian at a funeral. She kills the whole aesthetic of the board. She's useful for the grunt work, Marcus said. She's a grinder. She won't quit. She needs the paycheck. She's a mouse, Vanessa laughed again. Just keep her in the server room where she belongs. I stood there, holding my lukewarm coffee. A mouse. Useful for grunt work. I thought I needed the paycheck. That was their first mistake. They assumed because I drove a 5-year-old Volvo and didn't wear logos on my chest that I was living paycheck to paycheck like them. They didn't know I've been investing 60% of my income since I was 22. They didn't know I made a killing on shorting the housing market in 08. They didn't know that my net worth was likely double Marcus's, because Marcus spent his money on boats and Vanessa, while I spent mine on buying assets. I walked back to my office, my server room closet, and sat down. I looked at the Q3 projections again. The crash was coming. They were going to lose millions because they were listening to a boy who talked about vibes. I could have warned them again. I could have sent an email, created a paper trail, saved them from themselves. Instead, I opened a new browser window. I navigated to a site that wasn't on the company whitelisting protocol, but I had bypassed that firewall years ago. It was my personal brokerage dashboard. You want fresh energy? I whispered to the humming servers. I'll give you fresh energy. I didn't quit. Quitting is for people who have emotions. I have strategy. I closed the spreadsheet. I didn't forward my credentials to Braden. I sat there and watched the clock tick toward 5 o'clock p.m. The gala was tomorrow night, the annual Ascend Capital Charity Gala. Vanessa had made it mandatory for all senior staff. She wanted a court to hold court over. I looked down at my phone. I had a photo of my mother on my lock screen. She died 3 years ago. She was a schoolteacher who saved every penny she ever made. She taught me that quiet money lasts and loud money leaves. They think I'm a mouse, Mom, I said softly. The mouse was about to become the exterminator. The ballroom at the Ritz-Carlton smelled like desperation and expensive perfume. It was the annual Ascend Capital Gala, an event designed solely so Marcus could stroke his ego and Vanessa could play queen for a night. The theme was Gilded Future, which was ironic considering the financial precipice the company was currently dancing on. I arrived 20 minutes late. This was calculated. I wanted the room to be full so I could slip in unnoticed, stick to the shadows, and leave before the speeches started. I wasn't there to network. I was there because absence would be noted in my HR file as lack of team spirit, and I needed to remain employed for exactly 48 more hours to execute what I had planned. I wore black, a simple, long-sleeved sheath dress. It wasn't flash. It was architectural, high neck, fitted waist. But the piece de resistance, at least for me, was on my arm. It was my mother's handbag. It was a structured, top-handle leather bag from the late 1950s. It wasn't a Hermes or a Chanel. It was a bespoke piece made by an Italian artisan who had a shop in Florence that burned down in the 70s. The leather was a deep, patinated cognac color, scarred in places, soft as butter in others. It smelled like my childhood, like mints and old paper and safety. It was the only thing I had left of her that felt real. I grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing tray. It was warm. Of course it was. Ascend Capital cut corners on everything except executive bonuses. I found a spot near a pillar, watching the zoo. Braden was in the center of the room, wearing a tuxedo jacket that shimmered. He was holding court with 3 junior analysts who looked like they wanted to be him. Marcus was near the bar, laughing too loud at a joke that definitely wasn't funny. And then there was Vanessa. She was wearing a gold sequined gown that looked like it was actively attacking her body. It was low-cut, high-slit, and screamed "look at me" in a pitch only dogs could hear. She was surrounded by the wives of the other board members, a phalanx of buttocks and bitterness. I tried to make myself small, but the room was crowded, and the flow of traffic pushed me toward her circle. I tried to pivot away, but she spotted me. Her eyes locked onto me like a predator spotting a wounded gazelle. "Emily," she shrieked. It wasn't a greeting, it was a summons. The conversation around her died. People turned. I forced a smile onto my face. It felt like cracking plaster. "Hello, Vanessa." "Lovely evening," I said, clutching the handle of my mother's bag a little tighter. "I didn't think you'd come," she said, looking me up and down with a sneer that she probably thought looked elegant. "You're usually so reclusive." "I enjoy celebrating the firm's success," I lied. Vanessa's eyes drifted from my face down my black dress and landed on the bag. She paused. A cruel little smile played on her lips. She reached out, not to touch it, but to point at it with a manicured finger that looked like a talon. "Oh my God," she said, loud enough for the table next to us to hear. "What is that?" "It's a handbag," I said quietly. "It's ancient," she laughed. "Look at the scratches on it. Did you find that at a Goodwill, or did you pull it out of a dumpster on the way here?" The wives around her tittered nervously. Braden, who had wandered over, snorted into his drink. "It was my mother's," I said. My voice was steady, but my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "She passed away." You would think that would stop her. You would think basic human decency would kick in. Vanessa didn't have decency. She had insecurity and a black Amex card. "Well," she said, taking a sip of her drink and looking over the rim of the glass at me. "It's tragic, really. But honey, we're not dressing for a thrift store. This is a gala. Try to elevate yourself, You look like the help." "Yeah, Braden chimed in, grinning. "Upgrade your gear. We're big leagues now." The heat that rose up my neck wasn't embarrassment. It was pure, unadulterated rage. It was a cold fire. I looked at Vanessa. I looked at her tacky dress, her hollow eyes, her husband who was currently flirting with a waitress across the room. I looked at the bag in my hand, the leather my mother had carried to her chemotherapy appointments, the bag that held the tissues she used to wipe my tears when I got divorced. "I'll keep that in mind," I said. I didn't storm off. I didn't throw my drink in her face. That's what people do in movies, in real life. In the world of high finance, you don't make a scene, you make a plan. I turned around and walked toward the exit. I didn't check my coat. I walked straight out of the ballroom, through the lobby and into the cool night air. The valet asked for my ticket. I waved him off. I needed to walk. I walked 3 blocks to a quiet bench in a park. I sat down and placed my mother's bag on my lap. I smoothed the leather. "They think you're trash, Mom," I whispered. I pulled my phone out. It was 9:15 p.m. The markets were closed, but the world of private equity never sleeps. I opened my encrypted messaging app, Signal. I scrolled down to a contact I hadn't spoken to in 4 years. Contact, Julian Wolfhound. Julian was a corporate raider I had done a favor for back when I was an associate. I had found a loophole that saved him from an SEC investigation. He owed me, not a buy me lunch favor, a bury a body favor. I typed a message. Me, I need a war room. 7 o'clock a.m. tomorrow. The three dots appeared instantly. Julian, who are we killing? Me, Ascend Capital. Julian, I'll have the coffee ready. I stood up. The wind was biting, but I didn't feel the cold. I felt electrified. Vanessa wanted me to elevate myself? Fine. I was about to elevate myself right to the head of the table. I hailed a cab. Where to? The driver asked. Home, I said. I have work to do. I wasn't just a strategist anymore. I was a hunter. And the season had just opened. My apartment was silent, but my mind was a stock ticker floor in the middle of a crash. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I brewed a pot of black coffee strong enough to strip paint and sat at my dining room table. I had 3 laptops open. Step 1, capital. You can't buy a company with anger. You need liquidity. I logged into my personal accounts. Over 20 years, I had accumulated a significant amount of Ascend Capital stock options. They were part of my compensation package, golden handcuffs designed to keep me tethered to the desk. But Marcus, in his infinite arrogance, had never put a vesting lock on the secondary tranche. He assumed I'd never sell because I was a believer. I wasn't a believer. I was a hostage. I started exercising the options. I didn't dump them all at once. That would trigger a volatility halt and alert the CFO. I used a technique called smurfing, breaking a large transaction into thousands of micro-transactions. I routed them through 3 different shell LLCs I had set up years ago for real estate investments. To the algorithm watching the stock, it just looked like normal retail trading volume. Click, sell, click, sell. By 4 o'clock a.m., I had liquidated $4 million of my own position, but I didn't cash it out to a bank. I moved it into a holding account managed by Julian's firm. Step 2, the forgotten ones. Ascend Capital wasn't always a publicly traded giant. It started as a partnership. There were original investors, people who had been pushed out when Marcus took over, people who held Class B shares. Class B shares had 10x voting rights compared to the common stock, but they paid no dividends, so nobody wanted them. Except me. I pulled up the old shareholder registry. It was a PDF scan from 2012, buried deep in a folder named Archive Legacy. First name on the list, Arthur Penheligan. He owned 3% of the voting stock. He was currently living in a retirement community in Florida. Marcus had fired his son in 2018. I picked up the phone. It was 5 o'clock a.m., but old people wake up early. Arthur, I said when he picked up on the 4th ring. This is Emily Vance, from the old days. The girl with the math, Arthur rasped. I remember you. You're the only one who sent a card when Mary died. I have a proposition, Arthur, I said, staring at the glowing screen. I want to buy your Class B shares. Cash today, those worthless pieces of paper, he laughed. Marcus told me they were barely worth the ink. Marcus lied, I said. I'm offering you a premium, but you have to sign the proxy over to a holding company I control. Today. Why? He asked. The suspicion was there, but so was the greed. Because I'm going to take the company back, Arthur, and I'm going to fire Marcus. There was a long silence on the line, then a dry, wheezing chuckle. Better you than bankruptcy court, Emily. Send the papers. I hung up and moved to the next name. Sarah Jenkins, 2% voting stock. Disgruntled former VP. Sarah, it's Emily. Do you still hate Marcus? With every fiber of my being, she replied instantly. Good, I'm buying your hatred. Check your email. By 6:30 a.m., I had verbal agreements for 12% of the voting stock. Combined with the capital I was amassing, I was building a siege weapon. I showered, dressed in the same sharp black suit I wore to funerals, and drove to Julian's office. Julian's firm, Black Box Partners, was located in a converted warehouse in the industrial district. No signage, no receptionist, just a steel door and a camera. I buzzed in. Julian was waiting in a conference room that looked more like a hacker's den. He was wearing a hoodie and drinking Red Bull. You look like hell, Julian said, sliding a folder across the table. I like it. Did the transfers clear? I asked, sitting down. Clean as a whistle. You have liquid capital. And those proxy agreements you sent over? My lawyers are drafting the final purchase orders right now. But Emily, he paused, looking at me over his glasses. You know you need 51% to override the board, right? You're at maybe 15% with these scraps. I know, I said. I'm not trying to buy the company outright yet. I'm trying to create a liquidity crisis. Julian smiled. It was a shark smile. You want to tank the stock price so you can buy the majority stake at a discount. Marcus is leveraging the company to the hilt for this new crypto play Braden pitched, I explained. The cash reserves are thin. If I can stall their secondary offering, the one they need to pay the quarterly debt service, the stock will plummet. The board will panic. And when they panic, Julian finished, they'll sell. Exactly, I said. I don't need to fight them. I just need to let them drown and then buy the lifeboat. Julian tapped his keyboard. I'm in. What's my cut? You get the satisfaction of watching Marcus cry, I said. And 5% of the upside. Done, Julian said. Now, get back to the office. You have to play the part, be the mouse. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. The image of Vanessa's sneering face flashed in my mind. That bag is ancient. I'm not a mouse, Julian, I said, walking to the door. I'm the cat, Walking back into Ascend Capital that morning felt like walking into a crime scene where I was both the detective and the victim. The fluorescent lights seemed harsher. The silence in the elevator was heavy. When I swiped my keycard at the turnstile, light didn't turn green, it flashed red. Access denied. My heart skipped a beat. Had they caught me? Had the smurfing triggered an alert? I tried again. Red, trouble in paradise. I turned to see Braden standing behind me, holding a venti latte that smelled like pumpkin spice and unearned confidence. He was wearing sunglasses indoors. My card isn't working, I said, keeping my face blank. Yeah, about that, Braden said, taking a sip. Marcus asked IT to suspend your clearance for the level 4 data rooms. You know, security protocols. Since you're not part of the Inner Circle strategy team anymore. He used air quotes for Inner Circle. I wanted to break his fingers. I still need to access my desk, Braden, I said. Oh, sure. Security can buzz you in, but no more server room access. We're moving the servers to the cloud anyway. My buddy has a startup that does it. He breezed past me. Swiping his card, beep, green. I had to wait for the security guard, a nice older man named Earl, to manually let me in. Sorry, Miss Vance, Earl muttered. They changed the codes this morning. It's okay, Earl, I said. Just doing your job. I walked to my office. My computer was locked out of the shared drives. I couldn't access the Q3 projections anymore. I couldn't see the cash flow statements. They were blinding me. Marcus walked by my door 10 minutes later. He didn't even look in. He was on the phone. Yes, Vanessa, I'll book the table. No, she left early. Look, I'm handling it. They were erasing me. They were stripping away my access, my history, my relevance. In any other story, this is the part where the hero gives up. They go home, drink a bottle of wine, and update their LinkedIn profile. But they forgot one thing: I built the file structure. I didn't need the shared drive to see the cash flow. Years ago, I had set up a sandbox environment, a duplicate database used for testing models. It mirrored the live data in real time, but it was hosted on a legacy server that it usually forgot to patch. I pulled out my personal laptop, a battered MacBook I kept in my tote bag, my mother's tote bag, and tethered it to my phone's hotspot. I wasn't going to use their Wi-Fi. I ran a command line script. Ping, connection established. I was in the sandbox, and what I saw made my blood run cold. They weren't just leveraging the company for crypto, they were looting it. There were transfer orders queued for Friday, payments to consulting firms registered in the Cayman Islands. Firms that I knew with 90% certainty belonged to Marcus and his cronies. They were draining the liquidity before the crash. They knew the ship was sinking, and they were stealing the lifeboats. You bastards, I whispered. If I didn't act fast, there wouldn't be a company to buy. There would just be a shell. I spent the rest of the day sitting at my desk, staring at a blank company monitor while working furiously on my personal laptop. I monitored the stock price. It was holding steady at $45 a share, too high. I needed to create doubt. At 5 p.m., I packed up. I walked past Braden's office. He was throwing a foam basketball into a hoop mounted on his door. Leaving early, M? He called out, banking hours. Just clearing my head, I said. Hey, he said, stopping me. Vanessa wanted me to tell you. She knows a good consignment shop for the bag if you need the cash. He grinned. I looked at him. I really looked at him. I memorized the shape of his smirk. Tell Vanessa thank you, I said, but I prefer to hold onto my assets. I drove home, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Not from fear, but from adrenaline. When I got to my apartment, I went to my safe. Inside, next to my birth certificate and my passport, was a letter. It was addressed to me, dated 5 years ago. It was from the founder of Ascend, old Mr. Henderson, written 2 days before he died of a stroke. To Emily, you are the only one who actually understands that money is just trust in physical form. Watch Marcus. He has the ambition of a king, but the morality of a pirate. If the day comes when he forgets who built this house, remind him. I held the paper. It smelled like tobacco and ink. Reminder sent, I said. I picked up my phone and called Julian. Release the report, I said. The anonymous analyst report questioning the cash reserves, Julian asked. Yes, leak it to the financial blogs, tonight. This will start a fire, Emily. Good, I said, looking at the letter. Let it burn. Wednesday morning, the market opened with a scream. I wasn't at the office. I had called in sick. Migraine, I told the HR bot. It wasn't a lie. The sheer stupidity of Ascend's leadership was giving me a headache. I was at Julian's office, standing in front of a wall of monitors. The report had dropped at 2 a.m. A concerned insider analysis, posted on 3 major financial forums and picked up by Zero Hedge by dawn. The headline was simple. Ascend Capital, is the liquidity real? It didn't accuse them of fraud directly, that would get us sued. It just asked questions, pointed out the discrepancies between the public filings and the sector averages, highlighted the aggressive leverage. Look at that candle, Julian said, pointing to the chart. At the opening bell, Ascend ticker, ask, opened at $45. By 9:35 a.m., it was trading at $38. Panic selling. My phone buzzed. It was a mass text from the Ascend emergency alert system. All staff, emergency all hands meeting. 10 a.m. Attendance mandatory. I ignored it. The secondary offering, I said, watching the red numbers tumble. They were supposed to price the new shares today at noon. They needed the stock to be above $42 to satisfy the bank covenants. They're at $37.50 now, Julian said, taking a bite of a bagel. The banks are going to pull the deal, which means I said they have a cash crunch. This was the moment. The stock was in freefall, but the company still had value. The assets were real, the management was the cancer. Buy, I said. Julian hit a key. We weren't buying individual shares anymore. We were targeting Apex Holdings. Apex was a passive investment vehicle that owned 8% of Ascend. It was managed by a board of trustees who were conservative, skittish, currently watching their portfolio value evaporate. I had already engaged their lead trustee, a nervous man named Mr. Henderson, no relation to the founder. I had offered him a buyout of their Ascend position at $40 a share, a premium over the crashing market price, but a discount on the real value. Henderson is calling, Julian said. I put it on speaker. Miss Vance, Henderson's voice was shaking. We're seeing the price hit $36. Is your offer still valid? It stands for 10 more minutes, Mr. Henderson, I said, my voice cool. After that, I withdraw it and you can explain to your board why you rode the stock down to single digits. We accept, he blurted out. Send the DocuSign. Julian typed furiously. Sent. Signed, Henderson said seconds later. Good luck with it, it's a sinking ship. I have a good bilge pump, I said. Click. That's 8%, Julian said, plus the 12% in proxy votes. You control 20% of the company. Not enough, I said. I need 51%. The price is stabilizing, Julian noted. The panic is slowing down. Marcus must be doing damage control. I pulled up the CNBC live stream on one of the monitors. There was Marcus, standing outside the Ascend building, looking flustered but trying to project strength. A reporter shoved a microphone in his face. These rumors are baseless. Marcus shouted, our liquidity is strong. We are proceeding with our growth strategy. He's lying, I said. He's good at it, Julian countered. The stock is bouncing. Back to $38. I needed another hit. I needed to isolate them completely. The debt, I said. Ascend has a revolving credit line with City National. The covenants require them to maintain a certain debt-to-equity ratio. If the stock drops below $35, they breach the covenant. The bank can call the loan, and if the bank calls the loan, Julian said, grinning, they are technically insolvent. I know the loan officer at City National, I said. We went to Wharton together. He hates risk. I picked up my phone, time to make a friendly concern call. This was the dirty work, the part they don't teach you in business school. I was actively sabotaging the company I worked for to save it. It felt wrong, and it felt absolutely necessary. Hey, David, said when the banker answered. It's Emily. Look, I shouldn't be telling you this, and I'll deny it if you quote me, but have you looked at the transfer queue for Friday? The Cayman payments, there was a pause, the sound of typing. Then a sharp inhale. Emily, are these verified? Check the Sandbox server logs if you have audit access, I said. They're trying to move the cash before the breach. Mother of God, David whispered. I'm freezing the line. You probably should, I said. I hung up. 10 minutes later, the news broke on Bloomberg Terminal. City National freezes Ascend Capital Credit Facility pending audit. The stock price didn't just drop, it cratered. $38, $35, $32, $28. It's a bloodbath, Julian said softly. No, I said, watching the numbers turn redder and redder. It's a clearance sale. I looked down at my hand. I was gripping my mother's bag so hard my knuckles were white. Now, I said, we go for the kill. By 1 p.m., the Ascend Capital offices were a scene from a disaster movie. I decided to go in. My migraine had miraculously cleared up. I needed to be on the ground to see the whites of their eyes. When I walked onto the trading floor, the silence was terrifying. Usually there was shouting, phones ringing, the hum of commerce. Now, people were standing in clusters, whispering. Some were packing boxes. I walked past the glass conference room. Marcus, Braden, the CFO, and the general counsel were screaming at each other. I couldn't hear the words through the soundproofing, but the body language was clear. Marcus was red-faced, pointing at the CFO. Braden was slumped in a chair, head in his hands. I went to my desk. My access was still revoked, but I didn't need a computer to feel the panic. Emily, I turned. It was Sarah, the executive assistant to the CFO. She looked like she had been crying. Is it true? She whispered. Are we going under? The stock is down 40%, Sarah, I said gently. But the company has good bones, it depends on leadership. Marcus is talking about layoffs, she sniffled. He told me to cancel the holiday bonuses. Of course he did. He was probably trying to preserve cash to pay his own severance. Don't worry, Sarah, I said. Things change fast. My phone buzzed. It was an email from Braden, sent from his iPhone. Subject, urgent M, I know you're there. Can you come to my office? I can't get the pivot tables to work on the liquidity deck. Need you to fix it. ASAP, the audacity, the sheer unadulterated gall. He had locked me out of the system, mocked me, and now that the building was burning, he wanted me to bring a bucket. I walked to his office. I didn't knock. Braden looked up. He looked younger than 29 now. He looked like a child who had broken a vase. Thank God. Look, the bank froze the line. We need to show them a pro forma cash flow that looks better. Can you massage the numbers? Just move some of the Q4 projections into Q3? That's fraud, Braden, I said. It's aggressive accounting. He snapped. Everyone does it. Look, if the stock hits $20, my options are worthless. I just bought a Porsche, Em. I have payments. You have a Porsche, I said. I have a vintage handbag. We all have our crosses to bear. What? Look confused. Are you going to help or not? I can't, I said. I don't have access. Remember, you gave it to your buddy's cloud startup. I'll give you my password. He shouted, scrambling for sticky note. No thanks, I said. I don't want my fingerprints on this. I turned to leave. If we go down, you go down too. He yelled after me. Who's going to hire a 42-year-old analyst from a failed firm? I stopped. I didn't turn around. I think I'll be fine. Braden, I walked out. I went to the stairwell, the only place with no cameras, and called Julian. Status, I said. There's a hedge fund in Connecticut, Vanguardia. They hold 15% of the stock. They are hemorrhaging money on other positions, and this ascend drop is triggering margin calls for them. They need to liquidate. Fast. They'll be desperate, I said. They are. But they won't sell to a shell company. They want a vetted buyer. Proof of funds. Send them the proof, I said. Use the Cayman accounts we routed the money through. It's risky, Emily. If they trace it back, they won't look that close. They just want the cash. Offer them $25 a share. It's insulting, but it's cash on it. I leaned against the concrete wall of the stairwell. I was tired. My bones felt heavy, but the fire in my chest was hotter than ever. 10 minutes passed. My phone buzzed. Julian, they took it. $25/share. Deal closes at market close. I did the math in my head. 8% Apex plus 12% Proxies plus 15% Vanguardia equals 35%. I had 35% of the voting stock. The current board controlled roughly 10% between them. The rest was floating in the public market, scattered among thousands of retail investors who were currently panic selling. I need 16% more, I whispered. There's one more block, Julian said on the line. Private equity firm in Chicago. They have 17%, but they're friends with Marcus. They play golf together. Friends don't lose friends' money, I said. If the stock hits $20, they'll sell. It's at $26 now. Then we wait, I said. Tomorrow is the board meeting, the emergency session. You going to be there? Oh, I'll be there, I said. I wouldn't miss it for the world. I hung up and walked back into the office. I saw Vanessa walking out of Marcus's office. She was wearing huge sunglasses and carrying a box of personal items. She looked frantic. She saw me. She stopped. You, she hissed. Are you happy? The stock is tanking because of leaks. Probably you. I'm just a mouse, Vanessa, I said, my voice sweet. Mice don't leak corporate secrets. We just eat the crumbs. I hope you starve, she spat. She stormed out, her heels clicking aggressively on the tile. Hope is not a strategy, I said to her back. Tomorrow. It all ended tomorrow. That night, the city looked beautiful from my apartment window. Lights twinkling, oblivious to the fact that fortunes were being vaporized in the servers beneath the skyline. I was in my war room, my dining table. It was 11 o'clock p.m. The stock had closed at $22.50. The Chicago private equity firm, Redstone, hadn't sold yet. They were holding the line for Marcus. Loyalty is expensive, but apparently, they could still afford it. Come on, I muttered, staring at the after-hours trading monitor. I needed Redstone to crack. If they didn't sell to me, I'd walk into that boardroom with 35%. A strong minority enough to cause trouble, but not enough to decapitate the leadership. I needed the kill shot. My phone rang. It wasn't Julian. It was an unknown number. I picked it up. This is Vance. Miss Vance, a deep voice said. This is Thomas Redfield, senior partner at Redstone. My pulse spiked. Mr. Redfield, to what do I owe the pleasure at this hour? We know it's you, he said. I didn't say anything. Silence is a weapon. We tracked the shell companies, he continued. It took our forensic guys a few hours, but the routing numbers, they have your signature style. The structuring, it's elegant. Reminds me of the way you handled the 18 merger. I'm just an analyst, Mr. Redfield, I said calmly. Don't know what you mean, he chuckled. Cut the crap, Emily. You're buying the company. You have Vanguardia's block. You have the Class B proxies. We did the math. If you did the math, I said, dropping the pretense, then you know Marcus is driving the car off a cliff. Are you going to be in the passenger seat? Marcus is a friend, Redfield said, but... He paused. We have a fiduciary duty to our LPs. The audit report on the Cayman transfers. Is it real? I have the wire logs, I said. He's stealing from you, Thomas. A long silence. I could hear him breathing. If we sell to you, he said slowly, we want a board seat. And we want Marcus gone. Immediately. You get one seat, I said, and Marcus is gone before lunch. Price? I'll give you $23, 50 cents above close. Make it $24. Done. We'll fax the agreement to your counsel. Good luck, Emily. I hung up. I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for 2 days. 35% plus 17% equals 52%. I had it. I had the majority. I owned the company. I poured myself a glass of cheap wine. I didn't drink the expensive stuff, not yet. I went to my closet. I pushed aside the gray suits, the beige cardigans, the invisible clothes. I reached into the back and pulled out a dress I had bought 5 years ago and never worn. It was black, razor-sharp tailoring with a neckline that said I'm in charge. And then the bag. I took my mother's bag off the shelf. I got a soft cloth and a tin of leather conditioner. I spent an hour slowly, rhythmically polishing the cognac leather. I worked the conditioner into the scratches Vanessa had mocked. I buffed the brass hardware until it gleamed in the lamplight. You're not ancient, I whispered to the leather. You're timeless. I slept for 3 hours. Deep, dreamless sleep. I woke up at 6 o'clock a.m. I dressed. I did my hair not in the messy bun I usually wore, but in a sleek, severe blowout. I put on red lipstick, not bright red, blood red. I drove to the office. The sun was rising, casting long shadows. When I walked into the lobby, the security guard, Earl, looked up and did a double take. "Miss Vance, you look different." "I feel different, Earl," I said. I didn't go to my desk. I went straight to the executive floor. The boardroom was at the end of the hall. The meeting was scheduled for 8 o'clock a.m. It was 7:55 a.m. I could hear voices inside: Marcus, Braden, the lawyers. I stood outside the double mahogany doors. I checked my phone. Julian had sent a text: "Papers filed. The registrar is updated. It's official. Go get him." I put the phone in my mother's bag. I gripped the handle. It felt solid, grounding. I wasn't the spreadsheet ghost anymore. I reached out and pushed the doors open. The heavy doors swung open with a theatrical thud. Conversation stopped instantly. There were 12 people in the room. Marcus sat at the head of the long marble table, looking like he hadn't slept in a week. His tie was loosened. Vanessa was there, sitting in a chair against the wall, wringing her hands. Braden was pacing. The lawyers and the remaining board members looked like pallbearers. They all turned to look at me. "Emily," Marcus said, linking. His voice was hoarse. "This is a closed session. Board members and legal counsel only." "I know," I said. I walked into the room. My heels clicked on the hardwood floor. Click, 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 the sound echoed. "Emily, seriously," Braden snapped, stepping forward. "We're in the middle of a crisis. Go fix the coffee machine or something. We don't have time for your input." I ignored him. I walked straight to the table. There was an empty chair at the opposite end from Marcus. Pulled it out. I sat down. And then with deliberate slowness, I lifted my mother's vintage leather bag and placed it on the table. Right in front of me, Vanessa gasped. Her eyes went wide. She recognized the gesture. "Get her out of here," Marcus barked to the general counsel. "Security, I wouldn't do that," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like a scalpel. "You're fired, Emily," Marcus shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "You're terminated for cause. Insubordination? Get out." "You can't fire me, Marcus," I said calmly. "I am the CEO. I can fire anyone I want." "You can fire an employee," I agreed. "But you can't fire the majority shareholder." The room went so quiet you could hear the hum of the projector fan. "What?" Marcus whispered. A nervous laugh bubbled up from his throat. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about math," I said. "You like math, don't you, Marcus? Or is that just for the grunts?" I reached into my bag, my mother's beautiful, ancient bag, and pulled out a blue folder. I slid it down the length of the table. It spun and came to a stop right in front of the general counsel, a man named Sterling. "Read it," I said. Sterling opened the folder. He adjusted his glasses. He read the first page. He flipped to the second. His face went pale. He looked up at me, then at Marcus. "Well," Marcus demanded. "What is it?" "It's a disclosure of ownership." Sterling stammered. "Entities controlled by Miss Vance. Apex Holdings, the Class B block, Vanguardia, Redstone." He swallowed hard. "She holds 52% of the voting stock." "Marcus, that's impossible," Braden yelled. "She drives a Volvo. She's broke. She owns us," Sterling whispered. Marcus sank back into his chair. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in 10 years. He didn't see a mouse. He saw the end of his career. Vanessa stood up. "This is a joke," she shrieked. "She's lying. That bag. That bag is trash." I looked at Vanessa. I smiled. It was a cold smile. "This bag," I said, patting the leather, "is the only thing in this room with any integrity. And it's staying. You, however, are not." "You can't do this," Marcus stammered. "The company? The vision?" "The vision is over," I said. "The looting stops today. The Cayman transfers have been flagged to the SEC. Audit is starting now." "You'll ruin us," Marcus said, his voice trembling. "You ruined yourself," I said. "I'm just the liquidation team." I turned to the general counsel. "As majority shareholder, I am calling for an immediate vote to restructure the executive leadership." Second the motion," said the representative from Redstone who had just walked in the back door. "All in favor?" I asked. I raised my hand. The Redstone guy raised his. "Motion carries," I said. I looked at Marcus. "Get out of my chair." The exit of Marcus and Braden was not dignified. Security didn't drag them out, but they hovered close enough to make it clear that resistance was futile. Braden tried to grab his laptop. I told security to confiscate it. "Evidence," I said. He cried, actually cried. Vanessa was the last to leave. She stood by the door, clutching her purse, looking at the wreckage of her social status. She looked at me, sitting at the head of the table. "You're a monster," she whispered. "I'm a strategist, Vanessa," I said. "There's a difference. Monsters destroy for fun. Strategists destroy for leverage." She looked at the bag on the table, the scratches, the age. "It's still an ugly bag," she spat, trying to salvage one last scrap of superiority. "Maybe," I said, "but it holds the keys to your husband's office. So I think it's beautiful." She turned and fled. The next few hours were a blur of legalities. I appointed an interim CEO, a boring, competent woman from operations who had been overlooked just like me. We issued a press release. Ascend Capital restructures leadership, commits to transparency. The stock price stopped falling. By noon, it had ticked up $2. The bleeding had stopped. At 6 o'clock p.m., the office was quiet again. But it was a different kind of quiet. It wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence of a clean slate. I walked into what was formerly Marcus's office. It was huge. The view of the city was panoramic. I saw a box of his things in the corner, stupid trophies, a framed photo of him and Vanessa on a yacht. I sat down in the leather chair. It was too big for me, but I'd adjust the height. I opened the drawer, empty. I placed my mother's bag on the desk. It looked small against the expanse of mahogany. I opened it and took out the letter from Mr. Henderson. I placed it in the center of the desk. Remind him. I did better than that, I said to the empty room. I replaced him. I wasn't going to be the CEO forever. I didn't want the spotlight. I wanted the control. I would stay chairman of the board. I would guide the ship from the shadows where I worked best. I pulled out a small flask from the bag, whiskey, cheap stuff. The kind my dad used to drink. I poured a splash into Marcus's crystal tumbler. To the mice, I said, raising the glass, and to the ancient bags. I took a sip. It burned, but it tasted like victory. I checked the stock price one last time, up another $1. I had spent my life savings. I had betrayed my bosses. I had risked prison if the SEC didn't like my timing. But as I sat there, watching the sun go down over NY, I realized something. They never saw me coming because they never looked down. They were always looking up at the stars, at the next big thing. They forgot that the foundation is on the ground. And if you control the foundation, you can bring the whole house down whenever you want. I picked up the phone. Earl, I said, yes, Miss Vance, order me a pizza. And Earl, yes, ma'am, you're getting a raise. I hung up, leaned back, and finally, for the first time in years, I smiled a real smile. The spreadsheet ghost was alive, and she was hungry. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew.